Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour, bon matin. Bienvenue dans cette session intitulée « Ligne de front, quel ordre dans ce chaos mondial ?» Mon nom est Julien Toureil. Je suis ravi et privilégié de pouvoir modérer encore une fois des échanges essentiels et stimulants comme en offrent les MEDays. Le paysage mondial actuel est secoué par une série de crises majeures. La guerre en Ukraine ou encore les tensions en Asie-Pacifique testent, voire redéfinissent les rapports de force mondiaux. Les conflits au Moyen-Orient, en particulier au Liban et à Gaza, mettent non seulement en évidence des divisions entre puissances mondiales, mais illustrent encore plus les limites des considérations humanitaires et du droit international face à la prévalence des intérêts stratégiques. La crise climatique, qui exacerbe les catastrophes naturelles et l'insécurité alimentaire, expose les disparités entre les pays les plus vulnérables, le plus souvent du Sud global, et les plus industrialisés, responsables de cette crise. Plus fondamentalement, la scène internationale semble de plus en plus fracturée, divisée sur des questions telles que la représentativité des institutions multilatérales, le respect de valeurs appliquées selon une géométrie variable, l'équité climatique ou encore la gestion des flux migratoires. Face à ces crises multiples, qui donnent l'image d'une scène internationale de plus en plus chaotique, ingérable, ingouvernable, l'ordre international semble désemparé, semble inadapté. Dans ce contexte, que faire? L'ordre international actuel peut-il, devrait-il être réformé ou doit-il être totalement repensé? Et sur quelle base? Avec quels objectifs? Voici en quelques mots le menu de la discussion que nous allons avoir ce matin avec nos distingués panélistes. Je vous les présente très brièvement. Tout d'abord, son Excellence Dr Jorge Ivanov, ancien président de la République de Macédoine. Son Excellence Mari Kivniemi, ancienne première ministre de Finlande. Son Excellence H.E.Dr, ancien premier ministre de Slovéquie. Son Excellence H.E.Mr, vice-ministre des Affaires étrangères de Lituanie. Son Excellence Miroslav Lajčák, ancien ministre des Affaires étrangères de Slovéquie. Son Excellence Eva-Maria, ancienne ministre des Affaires étrangères d'Estonie. Son Excellence Douglas Luth, ancien ambassadeur des États-Unis auprès de l'OTAN et aujourd'hui président pratique internationale et de défense au BGR Group. Et enfin, son Excellence Dominique Dupuis, ancienne ministre des Affaires étrangères d'Haïti. Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue. Merci d'être avec nous pour ce panel. I will start our discussion with some quite general opening questions to set the tone for this discussion. First of all, Mrs. Kivniemi, how are your country and maybe countries in general redefining their strategic priorities to cope with the global instability?
Thank you very much. Happy to be here in MEDays and participating in this high-level conference. So asking your questions, really it has been the case that every country has been obliged to thinking their foreign and security policy priorities in recent years. And you can see it to be happened in 4 different concrete ways. First, when it comes to military alliances, NATO has received new members, my country, Finland, and Sweden. And the reason behind that was, of course, the Russian invasion and attack on Ukraine. And it was not technically a difficult decision for Finland because Finland had been so integrated into the military systems of NATO. But of course, politically, it was a big decision. But what was needed was, of course, the support from the citizens. And it was kind of amazing that in a very short time period, when earlier about 30% of Finnish citizens supported the NATO membership. So at once then, after the Russian attack, their share of citizens who supported the membership was 80. So for the politicians, it was then finally an easy and very clear decisions. So first, these military alliances, and also the strengthening the military and defense policy issues, and putting them high on the agenda in the EU, and strengthening kind of that aspect of other alliances is belong to that same category of changes which has been made. Second is that increased investment in military defense has been happening. And actually, when we look at the figures from last year, they were really record high. 23, the military expenditures increased globally by 6.8%, and that represented the fastest annual growth in over 15 years. And also when it comes to NATO members, 23 of them last year reached the 2% target of military spending, when a year earlier the number of NATO countries was only 10. And the third, what has happened when it comes to foreign and security policies of countries, is that many countries have increased their preparedness for hybrid threats. That is like cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, interference in democratic processes, and disruptions to critical infrastructure. So efforts really have been made to protect those, countering propaganda, improve people's resilience in society to withstand such challenges. And some concrete examples of that are, for example, the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats, which was based in Helsinki in 2017. And also in the Finnish case, we reformed our curriculum 2016, and there we placed a very strong emphasis on critical thinking and media literacy across all levels of education. And I'm sure that that has been made in many other countries too. Also, one more point, what has been done is that countries have enhanced their civil preparedness, resilience, and supply security. So bolstering domestic industries and secure supply chains, aiming to withstand global economic disruptions. So really also states have strengthened their strategic reserves of critical materials, including medical supplies, food, energy, to ensure readiness for emergencies. And especially in European countries, because many countries wanted to really and have been able to cut the ties to Russian energy sources. This has meant a very big change. In my country's case, 36% of our energy, total energy consumption was imported from Russia before the Russian invasion to Ukraine. But now the share is less than 7%. And because of new nuclear power plant, we started to produce electricity right in time, and also because of so much effort have been put in renewable energy sources. So these in these four areas, kind of the enhanced civil preparedness, resilience, and supply security, preparedness for hybrid threats, increased military defense, and then strengthening alliances and increasing the membership of those. In these terms, almost every country has been obliged to do changes.
Thank you very much, Madam Kiviniemi, for this first thoughtful words. Thanks a lot. Maybe same question about how countries should adapt to the current global instability. To you, Mr. Ivanov, if you want.
Good morning, everyone. I am first time in your forum. Thank you for your invitation. I will speak Macedonian language because it's easy to explain this very, very complex issue. Ако постои согласност меѓу сите е дека живееме во најкритичните денови од нашите животи. Не само критични, туку и опасни денови. Сите сме во исчекување што ќе се случи после 20 јануари, кога Трамп ќе влезе во Белата куќа. Стравот е уште поголем затоа што 70% од светска популација секој ден пристапува на интернет и сите информации ги добива од како официјални, така и многу неофицијални извори. Стравот е присутен секаде околу нас и не се слуша гласот на разумот затоа што живееме во епоха на позвистина, кога лагата и вистината се изедначени. Нема разлика меѓу лага и вистина. Глобализацијата овозможи целиот свет да биде поврзан и затоа и кризите сега влијаат на сите нас. Таа голема поврзаност предизвикува да и сите кризи меѓу себе се поврзани. Не можете да зборите за мигрантска криза без еколошка криза, без безбедносна криза, без енергетска криза. Таа поврзаност меѓу кризите создава голем песимизам, затоа што меѓународните институции се неефикасни да се справат со сите овие кризи. Но освен постојните меѓународни институции, немаме друг кој може да понуди подобар свет. Знаеме дека мултиполаризмот е резултат на победниците од Втора светска војна. И Обединетите нации, и Светска банка, и Меѓународен монетарен фонд. Но денес тие како повеќе да придонесуваат во зголемување на хаосот, отколку за решавање и воспоставување ред во хаосот. Советот за безбедност не може да одлучува и носи одлуки поради правото на вето. Светска банка и Меѓународен монетарен фонд се под влијание на богатите земји. Се создава голема поларизација на планетата, големо незадоволство од елитите, што создава популизам. Популистите нудат брзи решенија и нудат на граѓаните од нивен аспект надеж. Затоа има еден парадокс. Популистите не се антидемократски, тие се антилиберални. Тие се против елитите и незадоволството од елитите секој ден е се поголемо. Но во услови кога имаме војна меѓу Русија и Украина, војни на Блискиот Исток, гледаме во Алепо повторно влегуваат радикалните представници на ИСИЛ, на Џабал ел-Нусра, гледаме во Судан каква е ситуацијата. Нема континент и место каде човек може да чувствува безбеден, бидејќи таа меѓусебна поврзаност доведува да секој се чувствува загрозен. Предност е што располагаме и со креација на човековиот ум кој се нарекува вештачка интелигенција, кој може да помогне како алатка да ги обработува сите информации, да симулира ситуации кај се можни решенија. Решенијата секој пат се во диалог. Но кога генералите се гласни, интелектуалците и дипломатите се многу тивки. Дипломатијата не се чувствува и немаме шатл дипломатија од видот на Хенри Кисинџер, кој знаеше на лице место доди и да посредува меѓу завоеваните страни, па дури и до крај на својот живот доди и во Кина, и во Русија, и во Украина. Тој профил на дипломатија отсуствува од светската сцена и можеби тоа што тој го остава ко наследство, едно од неговите книги вели дека сепак вештачката интелигенција може да помогне во нудење на одговори, бидејќи е непристрасна и може да најде решенија за спорови каде има премногу емоции, премногу историја, премногу предрасуди, но тука имаме уште една замка. Технологијата многу побрзо напредува отколку етиката и правото. Добиваме области каде се злоупотребува се што може да биде од кори за човековата цивилизација. Гледаме како вештачката интелигенција ги контролира дроновите, како симулира воени действија, како вештачка интелигенција се користи да креира лажни вести на интернет, да создава представи кои нудат само страв. Освен стравот, друга сила која може да помогне на човештвото е надежта. Меѓутоа надежта се помалку ја има. Но надежта треба да ја очекуваме од постојните меѓународни организации кои треба да пројават храброст, решителност за да нудат решенија и ќе го потикнат диалогот меѓу сега веќе спротивставените страни. Ако е Ибн Халдун жив денес, тој би кажал се ова се случува затоа што отсуствува асабија. Значи, социјалната кохезија на нашата цивилизација исчезнува. Големата глобализација со либерализмот, индивидуализмот и екстремната поларизација доведува да нема солидарност меѓу луѓето. Ибн Халдун би кажал, умират империите. Значи, кога големите сили ја губат моќта, создаваат хаос. Но кој може да излезе од хаосот? Единствено повторно човековиот ум, човековите иницијативи и менување на парадигмата. Ние се уште сме под доминација на Хантингтовата парадигма за судир на цивилизациите, а ретко посветуваме внимание на алијансата на цивилизациите на Обединетите нации кој нуди решенија. Диалог, диалог, диалог. Така што од научен аспект состојбата е многу јасна. Неопходна е нова парадигма, односно неопходна ни е од аспект на метафора ефектот на метаморфоза. Мало појаснување метафората за да биде појасна. Кога шетаме низ шумата, ги гледаме гасениците и ние сме уплашени дека тие еден ден толку ќе се намножат, ќе изедат шумата. Тоа е стравот што доминира денес, дека актуелните кризи ќе го уништат светот. Но тие што ја знаат природата и науката знаат дека гасеницата во еден момент ќе создаде кожурец од кој ќе излезе пеперутка. Пеперутката е надежта, односно преобразување на кризите во решенија. Но за жал денес сите ги гледат гасениците, никој не ги гледа пеперутките. Надежта е во младите луѓе и младите генерации кои се упатени во овој технолошки забрзан свет, кои ги чувствуваат сите последици од кризите, бидејќи тие се најпогодени. И ако ја видите статистиката, 50% од светската популација се млади до 30 години. Но дали младите се вклучени во носење на одлуки? Не, само 2,91% се до 30 години членови на националните парламенти. Во 33 земји и национални парламенти нема ни еден до 30 години. А имаме парламенти во кои има пратеници од 95, 96, 97 години. Треба да им се даде поголема гласност на младите, бидејќи ние ја трошиме нивната иднина. Треба младите, како во периодот на студената војна, кога беа протестите против војната во Виетнам, да се слушне гласот на младите против сите овие конфликти и овој хаос што им го оставаме во наследство. Затоа е неопходно да се активираат Обединетите нации, да се одземе моќта од Советна безбедност и да се префрли на Генералното собрание, да многу одлуки се носат од мнозинството на светската популација, а не од победниците на Втора светска војна. Светската банка мора да се загрижи за тоа како се трошат средствата и парите и да прекине со толку голема поларизација која најмногу ја чувствува Африка. И тоа ќе биде причина за нови сојузи и нови, затоа што ако постојните институции не нудат одговори, ќе се најде решение во нови канали, нови процеси и нови асоциации. Животот е како вода. Водата никој пат не оди нагоре, секој пат се спушта надолу и си наоѓа сама свој пат. Така да, историјата не научила дека во кризни времиња се создаваат силни лидери, се создаваат нови решенија, се креираат нови парадигми и да се надеваме дека ова криза ќе изроди многу пеперутки, а не само гасеници. Благодарам.
Thank you, Mr. Ivanov. You've painted quite a dark portrait of the current world disorder, but you've also offered some optimism to move beyond our current crisis. And there is one question you raised that stuck to my mind, and I will ask this question to our next panelist. What happened with diplomacy to deal with the current party crisis? And maybe Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, you would like to at least start to answer the question. What happened with diplomacy in the current world?
Yeah, this is a million-dollar question, because the fact is that we live in the world where rules no longer apply or are not respected. The international architecture that was built after the World War II no longer represents or reflects the realities of today's world, and there are many countries and many regions of this world which feel underrepresented, and they of course demand having their fair share in shaping global policies. The fact is that when we look at the last 30 years, the China's share of the world GDP has gone from 6% to 20%. European Union's share went from 21 to 14, and the United States from 20 to 15%. So these are the new realities. And they, as I said, are not reflected in the global architecture, and therefore we see more polarity and less cooperation. We have gone from a multilateral system to multipolar system, but this has happened in an not a non-agreed way, and we see, as I said, countries, middle powers, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, South Africa, which are emerging, and we are becoming important actors, and they, of course, expressing their desire for adequate status on the global scene. We also see countries in a dilemma, because they understand that we are facing transnational or transborder challenges when we speak about the climate change, when we speak about the health threat, about the economic development. All this requires global answer, cooperation, but on the other hand, the countries see that the international organizations, which unfortunately do not adequately respond to these new realities, do not guarantee that their interests will be protected, and therefore they reach to, I would say, fluid, short-term alliances which are built more on interest and less on values. We see it clearly in the countries with the global south, which are rallying around the global challenges of their primary concerns, such as the climate change or economic inequalities, global governance reforms, and of course they are often positioning themselves against the Western-led global governance structures. I can mention the UN Security Council reform or the climate financing here, and they are of course advocating for more equality here. We see some emerging powers which are trying to position themselves between the West and the global South, and trying to play more active and more relevant role. And here the ever-growing relevance of the BRICS is the best example. We also see, as a consequence of this development, China and Russia getting closer together, in particular on issues such as energy, defense, and diplomacy, and also opposing the Western sanctions. We see new alliances in the Indo-Pacific area, and we also see European Union reaching out to partners that are considered like-minded, like Japan or Republic of Korea. What we need to do in this fragmented world, we need to build a new, more resilient world, and for this, we need to make several steps. Number one, to strengthen global institutions such as the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, to make sure that they are reformed, they are more inclusive and more responsive. Secondly, we need to prioritize the issues that transcend national borders, such as climate change, pandemics, or nuclear proliferation. Number three, we need to encourage regional cooperations, be it ASEAN, be it African Union, European Union, encourage them to take more active approach in addressing local crises, because usually regional solutions are more agile than the global ones. Number four, we need to develop more resilient, more diverse global supply chains, particularly in critical areas such as energy, food, technology, so that we avoid the vulnerabilities that we were all exposed to during the times of COVID pandemics. As my next point is the need to address the global north-south divide to make sure that the developing countries are not feeling left behind. Let's not forget the need to harness new technologies and to use tools such as digital diplomacy and artificial intelligence, but again, to make sure that all nations have access and at the same time that the digital sovereignty or privacy are respected. And finally, and that's very important for me personally, of course, building solidarity and trust. That means to prioritize dialogue and diplomacy over confrontation. That means the need to address inequalities in global governance, and that means building bridges between the global north and the south. It's a big wish, but if we can do it, we are able to do it. So I think this is the best way forward.
Thank you very much. I will move on a similar topic with you, Madam Lemetz, about diplomacy. Has diplomacy still a place in our current world? How should we renew diplomacy to cope with global challenges like climate change or technological revolutions, as Mr. Lacek just mentioned? What's your take on that?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this question, and thank you very much also for this opportunity to be part of this security discussion here in MEDays forum. I would like to say a few words about myself, then I think it's easier to understand my point of views. I'm coming from Estonia, so I'm coming from the northern part of Europe. Estonia was occupied by Soviet Russia since 1945 until 1991. And since that time, when we regained our independence, we of course joined the United Nations as soon as it was possible for us. But we also joined other democratic institutions, transatlantic institutions like NATO and also the European Union. So we are a small country in Northern Europe, bordering with Russia, and we strongly believe into international cooperation with other countries, and also to the institutions which protect international law, and particularly the United Nations, which Charter says that there is no right to use of force to gain other countries' territories. And now I'd like to come back to your question and the role of diplomacy. I personally have been a diplomat of Estonia for about 27 years. And I think that it also clearly shows that I am a strong believer of diplomacy. At the same time, I also believe that countries have to be ready to the situations when diplomacy fails. And I'm very much worried about the situation of the current world because we see that in spite of the international order that we have agreed on in the United Nations, we see that some countries are still very much interested in gaining additional or extra territories from the neighboring countries. And unfortunately, those aggressors are also part of the United Nations Security Council, the body which has right to intervene and protect the international order. And in spite of the diplomatic efforts, still we see all those military attacks around the world. So I think that we definitely should help to increase and empower diplomatic efforts at the United Nations. And I think it was already rightly said by previous speakers that one way to do is to give more power to the General Assembly. This is the body which is really the center of diplomatic efforts. All the countries are represented there, and whatever question is discussed, all countries have the say. Of course, the main question at the moment is what to do with the United Nations Security Council. This is the only body which really can affect and can give binding resolutions to member states. At the same time, we see that there are aggressor countries who have a veto right and who have used the veto right. So the question is what to do with this body, what other member states or other countries can do if they don't have the voice in this body. So I think that there is a great initiative on the table. This is French-Mexican initiative, how to reduce the veto power at the Security Council. And if this resolution passes, it means that the Security Council could intervene and have action against mass atrocities. So I truly hope that the international diplomacy will have and support the implementation of this resolution. It was first in the General Assembly in 2018, and only about 106 countries were supporting this resolution. So that we see that there is a chance to give stronger support to this resolution by all of our countries. So I think that other than that, what we speak about the Security Council and the United Nations, then because of the current challenges or challenges of today's world, particularly security challenges, we see that other international gatherings take this position. For example, we see that other institutions, for example, NATO and EU, they enlarge because like-minded countries want to come together and discuss common concerns. The same trends we see also in other parts of the world. For example, AUKUS is another international engagement in Indo-Pacific region. So I think there are two options. Either the United Nations strengthens itself with the help of all the member states, or we're gonna see the trends that other international gatherings, also like G7, who has strong initiatives to support Ukraine at the moment and to support other democratic countries across the world, come together and replace the miscomings of the United Nations. So I will stop here and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Limets. You've mentioned at the beginning, that you worry about the current situation, especially regarding respect to international norms like territorial integrity. That raised the question, and that leads me to my next question, maybe to you, Mr. Egger. How are current political crises, in your opinion, reshaping dynamics of international competition as well as maybe international cooperation?
Thank you very much. Good morning. First of all, also I would like to thank for organizing this great forum and really discussing this very important topic. And as you could hear from the previous speakers, there is a lot of issues, I would say, going on. And going to your questions, yes, there is a big impact on that. And I think there is temptation to kind of look at the current crisis that we are facing, not only in my part of the world, in Central Europe, but also in global aspect, to deal with them kind of short term, looking at it from a perspective of some upgrade, or how can we resolve the current turmoil that's happening in our regions. And I think that's a very natural approach to look and face these really, I would say, severe issues that we're dealing in our regions. But I think the more important is kind of stop for a moment and think, what is the global vision that we want to work toward? What do we want the world to look like, let's say, in 2050? Because I see that there is not many discussions about that, and that's why I'm so glad that the question stands as it stands, like what order in global chaos? We kind of admit that at this moment there is a global chaos. And why do we admit it? And I think, you know, if you look at it, and I see also in the audience several generations, starting with students and going to the senior, which is so great. And I think now the world is in a kind of, again, I would say a unique place. We're going through a transition, and I would say from an analog era into a digital era. Actually, we are in the digital era. And as it was mentioned by Mr. Ivanov, that, you know, 70% of people have access to the internet. We live in a digital era. We do live also in the virtual world. We get so much information that the humankind was never faced with so many informations at one time. And what I see that we are kind of failing in really in adaptation to this new age. And failing would be a pessimistic world, but to say it a little more positively, we are adopting, and it will take certain time. So from a short term, yes, we can expect that there will be still, I would say, turmoil phase, and we cannot really resolve it into bringing it into a totally peaceful arena. We rather need to, in this storm time or this rainy time, need to look what do we want the world to look like after we adapt to this digital era. And I think going to this, we need to keep to certain principles. And the principles are just asking about the territorial integrity. I think that's crucial. We should not really compromise certain values. We should not compromise certain values, because those values we developed over the time through experience, like freedom or territorial, setting the territories. I mean, that was agreed. It was paid a high price for the way the world was designed. Also, the territories were designed the way they are. So if we want to just kind of throw it over the board, that would be very, very disrespecting to the sacrifice of the people of the generations that we live after in our territories where we are. So looking at the vision 2050, I think it's so important to really think about the principles. And speaking of the principles of the future world, because we see that the polarization is growing to the extent that everybody is annoyed. All the people are annoyed. And the crisis and the wars and the turmoils that we're facing, nobody really likes them, and it's causing actually more fear. So we need to establish principles that will depolarize, that will bring the good of the people, the win-win scenarios. And then it affects, of course, the diplomacy, it affects the economy. And I think we need to start to draw for the citizens of our countries a scenario where we say, we want you to live, and I speak now as a politician, we want you to live in a country where there's going to be safety, security, it's going to be great healthcare, it's going to be prosperity, it's going to be also some social securities. So for the, I would say, common good. And I think if we draw this kind of principles and then you introduce it to your populations in your countries, then I think we start to get to a different, I would say, direction of the world, and it will immediately not resolve immediate peace, but it will give a vision toward the future. So that's why, going back to your original question that you asked me, yes, it is influencing because we're trying to resolve only the next step, and that's not correct. We should not do, because this is like playing a chess. I don't know how many of you like to play chess, but sometimes you feel in the chess that you're doing good moves, but at the end of the day, it breaks your neck. And it's rather better to think of, okay, what's going to be the best kind of move at the end, so it could be a win game, rather than trying to resolve the immediate situation. So if we set up the principles in the correct way and we start to speak about the principles of the future design or architecture of the world, and having in mind the price that was paid for the good principles that we already apply, as freedom, as territorial integrity, and I could go on, then I think we are starting to walk the good way. And I very much appreciate if we speak the short term, but let's speak of the short term always with the mind of the long term. And there is not many discussions on the long term around the world, and I think it's more and more needed to start to speak about the vision. Because at the end of the day, I tell you, as a prime minister who was in the office during the 4 crises, we had COVID, we had starting war in the Ukraine, energy crisis, double-digit inflation at one time within 2 years. And at the end of the day, even within the EU, we were able to cope with it. It was a lot of crisis management, but when there is a real need, people unite. I never saw such a unity around the EU leaders as it was during the COVID and during the war in Ukraine, because there was a great need, and of course we want to serve our nations. So sometimes the need creates also the answer, because it brings the unity. But that doesn't resolve the long future. The long future must be drawn now in a clear, thoughtful process with kind of a distance from the current problems that we're facing, and rather designing, because the future will look like somehow, but we can design it. So let's design it together. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Reger. You've challenged us to have bold long-term visions to deal with our current problem, but to imagine a world for the next 25 years. And I will turn in that regard to Madame Dupuy. How did you think we could adapt or propose new solutions, regarding current issues that need to be solved in a long-term perspective, like climate change or mass migrations?
Thank you very much. I will begin by thanking the Kingdom of Morocco and His Majesty the King for hosting us in this beautiful city of Tangier, and Institut Amadeus for organizing MEDays and enabling us, allowing us to have this very unique platform, particularly around the theme of South-South cooperation, which is very important for countries like mine. I am aware we're shifting gears a little bit geographically. I am the only speaker here from my part of the world, so I will give a little bit of context before addressing the question. Haiti is a relatively large country in the Caribbean with a population of about 12 million. And to reflect the conversation from the former president of Macedonia, of the 12 million, over 70% are under 35 years old, 52% are women, and this population is spread across 27,750 square kilometers. We are the first nation born of a successful revolution led by enslaved people. to achieve their independence. As such, the fight for liberty, the fight for sovereignty, and the fight for dignity is very much ingrained in our DNA. And on this continent, in Africa, and on the American continent, we have fought alongside all oppressed people, all voiceless people, and the belief that every human being has the legitimate right to aspire to self-determination, to self-realization, and to autonomy. So when we today see our situation where our human dignity is baffled, not only at home, but in our diaspora, particularly in the Dominican Republic, where Haitians suffer gross human rights violations, it requires us to take a stop and ask how we got there. At home, Haitians are facing a security crisis, unprecedented security crisis, that is fueled by armed gangs, using weapons we do not produce, by drugs we do not produce nor consume. This situation is characterized by mass violence and has created a devastating humanitarian crisis. In my country, 5.5 million people, that's nearly half the population, is food insecure. 700,000 people are internally displaced, and over the past 3 weeks alone, 40,000 new people were displaced. All the school system is disrupted, and gangs are actively recruiting children as young as 12 years old to form their troops. In this context, we can say that the chronic degradation of the situation in Haiti is a testament of the international community's failure to address pressing issues in one particular country when over 160 conflicts are open across the world, but one conflict in one part of the world seems to monopolize all resources and strategies. It's important for us to remember that the situation in Haiti is the result of the aftershocks of conflicts around the world, but it also creates waves across the region and across the world. Point in cases, as you mentioned, the climate crisis. Haiti, like many SIDS countries and many of the Caribbean countries, is on the front line of the climate vulnerability. We bear the brunt of the burden of emissions we do not produce. We bear the brunt of the burden of disrupted rain patterns, of extended droughts, of the entire economy, agricultural economy being disrupted and communities being devastated, and we should not have to face this responsibility alone. The time for collective action is now. And when Haiti comes here or across platforms to ask for solidarity, we are not asking for charity. We are merely reminding the world of its duty to invest in a country that deserves its fair right in the human participation on the global scale. And investing in Haiti today and allowing Haiti to resolve this crisis is investing in a more equitable future, global future, for not only the region, for the entire world. The second front, of course, is the migration crisis. And I cannot address this point without saying that no Haitian wants to leave Haiti. It is my firm belief that if given the choice, every Haitian will choose to stay home, and those who have left will choose to return home. Haitians do not leave by choice or aspiration, they leave by desperation. And if countries like the United States invested half of their budget that they invest in border control and addressing the root causes of displacement, we would be far off. We do not create the conditions for this insecurity. We should not have to bear the cost of resolving it and not have to bear the cost of losing our brothers and sisters who have to cross by makeshift boats to go to neighboring countries alone. So if I can conclude on a thought, as I look around this room, and it looks like any room that I could be in Haiti, because it's filled with youth and opportunity and future and hope. And I would urge this Moroccan youth and anyone looking at home to not only stay connected with the world, to remember that we are part of a larger fabric that requires your voice, but to stay committed to the fight for human dignity as we rethink of a new world, rethink of reshaping this chaos into order. Human dignity remains the sine qua non condition in which we can all belong and participate. And only you, not AI, not current global leaders, only you hold the power to make sure that it remains at the center of the conversation and of the new world order. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madame Dupuy. You've mentioned that it's time for collective action, but in a few weeks' time, we will have an elephant coming back to a certain office, and I'd like to ask this last question to our last two panelists. What impact could Donald Trump's return to the US presidency have on international alliances and multilateral efforts to address global crisis? Maybe first, Mr. Melunas, if you'd like to answer this question.
Thank you very much. First of all, taking this opportunity, I would like to sincerely thank the organizers of this session and this event, great event, very timely, very needed. And if you would allow me, I think that our American friend would be better to answer a question about future American administration. And I would like to, taking this opportunity, to share some views on issues, problems we already discussed. My first thesis is that describing existing situation globally, we have to use correct words. We have to name spade a spade. Let me give a few examples. We say that we live in times of global chaos. We are facing some huge new challenges. Is that really correct? Pandemics or environmental issues or geopolitical tensions? Just have a look at world's history in 20th century. Pandemics, environmental challenges, geopolitical tensions, 2 world wars. It's in principle nothing new. The problem is, the issue is, the question is, are we ready to learn from our history? And are we ready to unite efforts? Are we ready for these united actions to tackle, to manage those issues? Then we speak about, in terms of geopolitical situation, about polycrisis. Yes, so many conflicts around the globe, but in fact, I think we are facing one huge, major crisis. I name it autocratic world against the rest. Autocratic world led by such autocratic powers like Russia and China. They don't like existing world order. And actually that is the narrative that we need, new world order. Existing world order is great. It's based on international law. United Nations Charter is great global document approved by all member states some many years ago. So I don't think we need a new world order, which in a way autocrats think would mean establishing world order based on so-called jungle law, which means only might makes right. What we need today to unite our efforts to protect existing world order based on the international law. Then speaking about, are we ready to name spade a spade? Ukraine. You hear many times nowadays and in this event such terminology like Ukraine conflict, war in Ukraine, Ukraine crisis, Ukraine situation. Is that correct? Absolutely not. We have to name spade a spade. It's genocidal war, Russia's genocidal war against independent, sovereign Ukraine. Why I'm saying genocidal war? Russia today deny right of Ukrainians, of the state of Ukraine, of Ukrainian nation to exist. They say publicly, such country like Ukraine is just artificially created. It has no right to exist. Ukrainian nation has no right to exist. So it's genocidal war. And it's not the first attempt by Russians to exterminate Ukrainians. Just one example, man-made famine, Holodomor in 1932, 1933, initiated by Russian dictator Stalin. More than 4 million Ukrainians died at that time. So, as I said, we have to name spade a spade. And then maybe we can find better solutions how to manage all those issues, all those crises, and encourage ourselves to stop aggressors, to prevent them from changing existing world order. And in the end, just in few sentences, answering to your previous question, how individual states, sovereign states, adapt their strategies. So Lithuania's example, security and economy. Security, in last 3 years, we almost doubled our defense spendings from 2% of GDP to 3.7%. And enhance cooperation with our partners, allies, first of all, in the framework of NATO. And if there is a need, we are ready to move forward to invest much more in our defense and security. Now, speaking about economy and resilience, that's again great point for further discussion. Lithuania, as our neighboring country, Estonia, was for many years occupied by Russians. We regained independence 35 years ago, in 1990. At that time, we were 100% dependent economically and energetically on Russia because we were occupied by Russians. So we imported 100% of gas, of oil, and almost 60% of energy from Russia. We exported more than 80% of our production to Russia, to country which is autocratic today, which is totalitarian country. What we have today, we built our national oil terminal, LNG terminal, invested a lot in renewables. So today we are 100% independent from Russia. We are importing no oil, no gas, no electricity from Russia. We import gas from United States and Norway. We import oil from Saudi Arabia. We import some electricity from Sweden, and our economy is doing well. With regard to Lithuanian origin export, our export goes mainly to like-minded countries, more than 90% of goods and 90% of services. With regard to foreign direct investments, 98% of foreign direct investments in Lithuania came from like-minded countries. So I believe, yes, Lithuania is a small country, 3 million population, but I believe this is a good example to follow, how to increase resilience.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. You've mentioned, Mr. Melunas, that nowadays there is one major crisis or major risk, that is the rise of autocratic powers that don't like the current world order but prefer jungle law. In the past, Donald Trump has expressed his admiration for autocrats and strong leaders. And Mr. Lute, as the last speaker, you may not have an easy position here. Should we be worried about Mr. Trump's return to the presidency?
So let me join other panelists in thanking His Majesty for hosting this and for the invitation to be here. And this is an especially important format because it's not dominated by the United States and European powers, but by the global South. So I, as an American, I've taken a lot of notes. This is a wonderful format. Before I get to Donald Trump, and I will share some personal thoughts on what we might expect, I want to reflect on my Lithuanian colleagues' comments just now. For all the young people in the audience, he made some very important points. First of all, why is today different? Are we really, as some global leaders say, at a historic point? And what's pushed us from transition to chaos? But why is it chaos? And I think fundamentally, it's because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. I think that was the catalytic event. And so when President Joe Biden says that we're at a historic moment, I think that's the event that marked this historic shift and is pushing us towards chaos. And I say that because the second article of the UN Charter captures the values that others have mentioned here. And this is fundamentally, these are the cornerstones of the global order, right? Territorial integrity and national sovereignty. This says essentially that nation states get to choose whether they're going to associate with others and so forth. And that nation states should be secure in their national borders. And it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine that challenges those two cornerstones of the existing order. Now look, even without the invasion of Ukraine, the world order was in transition. We were moving from a post-World War II bipolar world through, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, what some would argue was a unipolar world with the United States having overwhelming power. Gradually, I think we've been moving towards a multipolar world. And that transition is going to happen. But I think it's been accelerated and it's been amplified by this catalytic event, the invasion of Ukraine. So don't miss that. And for the young people in the room, go back and reread the UN Charter. Before we throw out the UN, and as we talk about the potential for reform of the UN, perhaps rebalancing this power structure between the Security Council and the General Assembly, don't throw it all out. Article 2 is the very foundation of stability. Now, I wish I could offer a very promising, uplifting, hopeful view from Washington. I didn't bring this view with me from Washington. But let me try to explain some of what I believe we will experience from Washington in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. First of all, it's obvious that with any change of to a new president, a new administration, just as is the case in I think all our countries, we can expect new players. And the Donald Trump team is being announced, right? It's being laid out. And so this is very normal. This would happen no matter who's elected president and would happen in most of our countries in much the same way. So the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, and so forth. And this transition will take place over the next 3 to 6 months. I think this transition will be a bit more turbulent than other American presidential transitions because this administration is taking some steps which are not according to norms and conventional procedures. But first of all, transitions are transitions, and this is to be expected. Now, what about this team, the Donald Trump team? First of all, they have very little executive experience. There's very few of them who have actually run anything, and very few of them who have ever served in the executive branch of the US government. And as someone who spent 42 years in that world, it's a very different world than the business world or Wall Street or the media world. And so I expect that as this new team comes into office, they will bring with them their inexperience in governing. And I think that they will discover what many American political figures discover, which it is one thing to campaign, it is another thing to govern. And so there'll be a very sharp curve, what we in the States call a learning curve with regard to this new administration. Now, in traditional terms, the American government is protected by a system of checks and balances. In other words, our founding fathers, and unfortunately at that day, in those days, they were all fathers, okay, would not be so today. But they established by way of our Constitution some guardrails, some protections against an executive branch, a president, who is too powerful or seeks too much power. And typically these checks and balances are between the executive branch and our Congress, the legislature. So there are some constitutional guardrails against an overzealous, autocratic president. I think that this administration will challenge some of those guardrails, some of those conventional guardrails. And of course, the fact that the Republican Party brought to power not only Donald Trump, but holds both houses of our Congress means that those guardrails are going to be in question, in challenge. There are some guardrails having to do with norms and regulations that are not constitutional based, but I think also those normal guardrails on executive power, those checks on executive power, will be challenged by this administration, much as the first Trump administration challenged many of the conventions. I think there's another guardrail, though, that maybe is not in the Constitution, but it's the guardrail of inexperience and perhaps even incompetence. And some of these nominees, I believe, will be limited in their ability to deliver on the rhetoric because simply they don't know how to govern. Now, I may be proven wrong, but that's my current assessment. I also think, a third point, that we should expect in a Trump administration that the team, so the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, so forth, that these positions will be turbulent. Remember that in Trump 1, in the first administration, there were 4 national security advisors in 4 years. It was a revolving door of senior administration officials. And that turbulence inside the administration is also a factor that leads to what may well appear from the outside looking in, and sometimes from the inside looking in, as chaotic. The final factor I'd mention in terms of what to expect has to do with the president-elect himself. A number of things. First of all, typically after an administration change, other powers, our allies, our opponents, our partners, look to Washington, D.C., the bureaucracy for stability. In some administrations, increasingly, others look to the White House for the word, right? What is the American policy? What we should expect in this administration is that you have to narrow your view even further and look to the Oval Office. This is not going to be a normal administration in terms of where the policies come from. Donald Trump will be the host of most of those policies himself. You can expect him to remain very transactional in a business deal sort of style, and that this style will lead him increasingly to bilateral deals, not multilateral. So many of our panels this week have dealt with the power of multilateralism and so forth. I think this is an administration that will value bilateral transactional relations. Finally, President-elect Trump, values unpredictability. He sees value in not being predictable. And he sees this internal to his own team. So there's unpredictability inside the Washington team, but also especially with allies, partners, and opponents. And he sees value in this because as he's unpredictable, everything has to turn to him. Everyone has to come to him for the decision. So this empowers himself by way of this unpredictability. And I don't think that will change. He's 78 years old. I'm sorry. Folks at that point in their lives don't typically have a change in life. So what to expect from Trump 2? Look to Trump 1. And I don't think we should expect that this administration will contribute to global order.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Lut. Time flies. It's really unfortunate because I would have liked to ask tons of questions to our panelists, and I guess you would have liked to ask a lot of questions since we have a lot of food for thought this morning, but the organizers would not be very happy if I were to start a new discussion for about an hour or two. So we will end here, and I would ask you to join me in congratulating and thanking our distinguished panelists for this masterful presentation. Thank you. Easy part for me. Thanks a lot, and have a good day.